It is good to see you again, and well, at least to see the front row. Can't really see past 2 or 3 rows out with the lights. I don't know if you've ever watched a movie or read something, maybe an article or something in the newspaper, or just witnessed something in life that is so shocking that your only thought is amazement at the audacity of people. I don't know if that's ever, if it's ever happened to you. This text is an example of something like that. And so I invite you to look at the text. It's from the book of Judges, chapter 17. There was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and also spoke it in my ear, behold, the silver is with me. I took it." And his mother said, "Bless my son by the Lord." And he restored the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother, and his mother said, "I dedicate the silver to the Lord from my hand for my son, to make a carved image and a metal image. Now therefore I will restore it to you." So when he restored the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith, who made it into a carved image and a metal image. And he was in the house, and it was in the house of Micah. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and household gods, and ordained one of his sons, who became his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now there was a young man of Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. And the man departed from the town of Bethlehem in Judah to sojourn where he could find a place. And as he journeyed, he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said to him, "I am a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to sojourn where I may find a place." And Micah said to him, "Stay with me, and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, and a suit of clothes, and your living." And the Levite went in. And the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. And Micah ordained the Levite, and the young man became his priest and was in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will prosper me, because I have a Levite as priest." What do you think when either you read the text or you heard it? I mean, whenever I read this text, and I've read this thing 1,000 times, my first thought is always, "Are you kidding me? I mean, who acts like this?" And then after about a minute or two, it's a sobering reality that maybe this text has more to do with our society and our life than what we would like to admit or even imagine. The story's about a guy named Micah. Now, this is not Micah, the prophet, who was a contemporary of Isaiah. That guy that actually has a book in the Old Testament that's named after him. This is years after this Micah. This is the Micah that's not too long after Moses. Moses, Exodus, you got the 10 Commandments. They leave and they go into the Promised Land, into Canaan. And then right after Moses, you've got Joshua. And then you go through a period of time which are called the Judges. Now that took a number of years. And Micah is a judge. He's after Gideon, but he's before Samuel. So it's not the Micah that we think when we think about the Old Testament, the prophet. This is a different Micah. This is the Micah who is one of the judges. And one day, Micah he's coming home, and about the time he's in his front yard, he hears his mother, who is in a tizzy. I mean, she is beside herself because she has lost 1,100 pieces of silver. Now, what that means in our context, if you could imagine her life savings, her pension, her 401k, her retirement, that's 1,100 pieces of silver. And she has it one day, and then the next day she doesn't, and you can imagine what that's like for her. And so instantly she starts calling down all types of curses to the person who stole it. Now, she doesn't know who stole the 1,100 pieces of silver. Micah is coming into his house, and he hears his mom just going to town. I mean, she's cursing the person that stole it, and that person's family, and their children, and their 10th generation removed from their father's side. I mean, she's just letting it go. She's so upset because her life, I mean, she doesn't have a retirement anymore. All of her money's gone. And Micah is afraid. Not afraid because he stole the money. He's afraid that he's going to get caught, and all these bad things that she's wishing upon the person that stole it, that somehow that's going to land on him. And so he is afraid. If you can imagine, have two children, and when they were really young, and they did something they weren't supposed to do, and then they kind of ran into your presence, and they're kind of shaking and looking around, and acting kind of weird. That's Micah. He didn't know what to do. His mom is calling down all these curses. He stole it, and so what he does is he goes into his mom and he says, "Mom, that silver that is missing, you need to know something. I took it." And what's interesting is that the mother, instead of dealing with the fact that her son stole it, instead of dealing with the issue of theft, she's just happy to get the silver back. Because the issue for the mom is not that it's right or wrong. It's just, I want to get, I want the silver returned. For her, it's about getting what she wants. I mean, how often do we spiritualize getting what we want? It has nothing to do with right or wrong. I mean, who cares about that, right? I mean, it's just about getting what we want, and sometimes we even will invoke God into the middle of that. I mean, what do you pray for? God, if you would just make those people do this, or if you could just help me do that, or God, what I really need is the lottery, I mean, if you could just help me win the lottery, right? That's what we got going on here. I mean, how often do we spiritualize getting what we want? And yet, when we read the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament, particularly when it comes to prayers, I thought prayer had more to do with thy will be done and not my will be done. And yet the mother, doesn't matter that my son's a thief, doesn't matter that he stole from me, the silver has been returned to me, and actually she blesses him for returning the silver. It has nothing to do with whether or not he did anything right or wrong. It's don't worry about the repercussions. After all, it's really not wrong, right? I mean, he returned it. So that's what she's excited about. And she blesses him for it. When I was reading this text, one of the things that, I don't know if it ever happens to you, childhood or teenage memories come back that are kind of similar to this. I don't know if that happens whenever I read the Bible. I don't want to admit that, but it does. And one particular time was when I was 15, a few months shy of being 16. And I have a little brother who had just turned 14. And my little brother had some of his buddies over one night, and they had the bright idea that the best thing they could do in the middle of the night was sneak out of the house and get into my mother's car, which was quiet compared to my dad. He had a truck, and if you crank that up, it's loud. But my mother's car, you could push out of the back part, you could push it out of the driveway, put it in neutral, and then you could crank it up down the road, and nobody would hear it. So they had a bright idea that at 14 they were going to sneak out at night and take my mother's car out. Well, me being an older brother to one of the older brothers to my younger brother, I was a little concerned that at 14 he really didn't know how to drive. And so I went to him and said, I tell you what, I'm about to be 16. I've got my learner's permit. I'll drive for you. You just tell me where y'all want to go, and so that y'all can be safe and everything would be all right. I'll take care of it. And so we did. And we did it, and we did it, and we did it numerous times throughout a particular summer. And then it was getting close to the end of summer, and some of his buddies were spending the night again, and they said, well, we're going to take the car out again. And I said, well, I don't think we're going to do that. So, well, we're going to go even if you drive or not. So they did. It just happened to be that about 3 in the morning, they happened to one of my mother and father's friends was riding down the road, and he saw my little brother and some of his buddies in my mother's car, and the next morning he calls my parents and tells them what he witnessed. And my younger brother and I were playing summer baseball, and so we see my mom drive up over the hill. We knew exactly what was going on, so we looked at the coach and said, "Coach, we're not going to be able to play for the next couple of games." And sure enough, she drove up, looked at the coach, said, "Coach, I need to take Shane and Trey." So we got in the car, went home, and went through various levels of punishment. And then we were upstairs after, sent to reflect on our actions. And both of us came to the conclusion, why are they so upset? I still can remember my brother asking me this. Why are they so upset? We returned the car safely. That's Judges 17. The mother, she actually blesses him and not worried about right or wrong, because for her, it's just about getting what she wants. C.S. Lewis said that often we really don't want a God to follow. What we really want is a grandparent. Because what happens when grandchildren visit their grandparents? It's cotton candy, right? You get to eat that all the time. Because with grandparents, grandchildren get what they want. It's not about right or wrong. At least it's not in the text. And so she, upon the Micah saying, "I stole it," and she's so excited, and so what she does is she blesses the son, and she says, I'm going to consecrate all this money to God. God has returned it to me, and so all this belongs to God. And so what we need to do is we need to make an idol. Now, help me out on something. What commandment talks about making idols? It's number 2, right? And is it a good thing or a bad thing to make an idol? Remember what the 10 Commandments are. 10 Commandments are about when the children of Israel are going into a foreign place. They're going to be living in a totally different place. And so the 10 Commandments are file lines to help them. They're aids to help them when they get into this new land, this land that is called the Promised Land, this land that's called Canaan. When they get in there, it's aids on how to live. And one of the big issues that can be destructive for people and families when they get into this new land is this whole concept of making an idol. But it really doesn't matter, right? So excited. My retirement's been returned to me, so I'm going to bless my son for stealing it in the first place because he brought it back. It's really not that bad. And we need to acknowledge this with an idol and a shrine in our house. But here's where it even gets even better. Now, she consecrated all the money, but how much did she give to make the idol? 200. Not the 1,100. I mean, it's really just about getting what you want, right? I mean, are we really responsible to the vows and the covenants we make? I mean, is that really important? When it comes to our faith, I mean, we make these all the time when it comes to with self. We make vows and covenants with family members. We make vows and covenants with friends or different agencies or organizations. I mean, do covenants and vows really matter? I mean, it's just words, right? I mean, they're not important. We can just say and do whatever we want. It really doesn't matter. Because it's just about getting what we want. Not about right or wrong, is it? Let me ask it differently. Is lying really that destructive? I mean, it's just words, correct? It really doesn't matter what we say. So Micah makes an idol, and then he appoints his son as a priest. Now, back in the Old Testament, I think it's in the book of Leviticus. It shows up a little bit I know it's in Leviticus. It shows up a little bit in Exodus, a little bit in Deuteronomy. There are very specific rules about who can be a priest and who can't. You have to be a descendant from Aaron. Now, Aaron had some cousins who are Levites, and they are, they're within the family structure, but they're not from the direct line of Aaron, so they can't be priests. Micah's not either one of those. But he's got an idol, and he's got a shrine, he's got a place of worship in his own house, and so he's got to have somebody to be the priest, right? So he anoints his son. You be the priest for the house. And that works for a while, because verse 6 is really telling. Verse 6 says that in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. So I can make an idol. I can anoint my son to be the priest, at least until something better comes along. And that's exactly what happens. There's this guy, a Levite, who's traveling through, and he discovers a little bit about his history. And so he fires his son, and then he ordains the Levite to be the priest. You know why this is a struggle? Behind all this, hubris, pride. Do you know what the chief of all sins is? It's pride. The desire to call the shots, and we can even justify that desire even with God. And yet what we discover in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, particularly in the person of Jesus, is that what sits at the core with God, and when it comes to people, humility. It's amazing sometimes what we do when it comes to, even with our faith, about the desire to get what we really want. I don't know if you saw, there was an article, I think it was on Thursday, about a guy in the name of God said he needed a new Learjet. Did you read that? That's crazy. The old one's not good enough. You've got to have a new one. God needs you to give it to me. What's the difference between that and Judges 17? Behind it, pride. He sees this Levite. He thinks that, he thinks his luck is changing. That, the winds are now at my back because the Levite's better than my son. So he fires the son. He hires the Levite. It's not a priest now, but I need something. I need someone a little higher up the totem pole. Now, not from the tribe, not a descendant of Aaron, so he really doesn't qualify as a priest, but he's better than my son. And then you get to the very end of the text, after he ordains and sets up this Levite. He says, now I know that God's really going to bless me. Doesn't matter that I stole. Doesn't matter that I made an idol. Doesn't matter that I employed my son to be my priest, and when I had a better offer, I hired him. And it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. See, this is just a better way for me to get what I want. And if I can invoke God in the middle of that, then surely that's going to happen. Do you know what this is? Self-deception at its core. And the crazy, it's a crazy story, isn't it? And yet it probably has more to do with our society than we want to admit. In the Gospels, there's an image that there's a kingdom. And the kingdom belongs to God. And we're the ones that live in the kingdom as a citizen who follow the owner of the kingdom, not the other way around. Which means what's part of our faith, it's not about getting what we want. It has more to do with submission. So part of our history here at St. Paul is that we take communion on the first Sunday of the month. You know what's woven into every fabric of communion? Submission. And the acknowledgement that we live in this kingdom that belongs to Him, not the other way around. So in a few moments, when you're given the opportunity to come and take communion, as you receive the bread and you dip it into the cup and you eat it, what we do is submit. Submit more to what He wants and not what we want. Oh God, we read this text, and on one level we laugh and we think, nobody acts this way. This is just some old story about some crazy guy that lived a long time ago. And yet, on the second thought, we realize this is pretty close to home. And maybe more to say about us than we're scared to admit. And yet the counter to this is submission. And so in this act of submission, as we celebrate what we call this sacrament, that there is one who actually gave of himself, did not exercise his own right, was not prideful, but yet empties himself, lowers himself so that others would live. We acknowledge that this morning, and we give thanks and praise to your Son, Jesus Christ, who models what it's like to live in a kingdom full of submission. This we gladly do this morning.